Yeah. Good morning, my friends. How are you today? Was that not the most inspirational and motivating speaker? Like, oh, I just adore Glenna and appreciate her messages and the opportunity to take what we're experiencing, disruption, and rise innovation out of it. My wheels are turning, it just gives it a new framework. And I appreciate that positive, there's something I can do about it framework, right? So appreciate you joining us today. So let's see who's in the room here. If you are with a parent center, give us a shout out. Okay, awesome. Really glad that you're here. Fantastic. If you work with a state department, raise up your hand here. All right, welcome. Awesome. We appreciate you. If you are with a district, if you work at a district level, raise your hand. Okay, awesome. And if you're an independent person or consultant and do work in this space, raise your hand. Okay, fantastic. I would fall in that bucket as well. Great.
And others.
And others. What about others? Okay. Yeah. And tell us.
County Office of Education, California, Delta.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I work for the Market, Tennessee.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Excellent. Glad you're here. Thank you. Andy? Yeah. Andy is an attorney in Connecticut who is the legislative chairperson for COPA, right? The Council of Parent Attorneys, and an emerging friend of mine. So glad you're here, Andy. Thank you. Awesome. And I know we've got Jason Harper in the back, a mediator. He does mediation all over the country and a rock star back there. All right. We are also being live streamed, which means we need to tether ourselves to this spot up here, which as a former teacher is not my style. So we're going to do our best in that. Also, you have our slides. They are linked. You have our contact information. I'm an Italian, I talk fast, and Janet and I spoke this morning. We're gonna just have this be a casual pace. So we might not get through all of our slides. There are a lot of slides at the end that are resource slides, slides about Cadre, other slides. You will find a bazillion million hyperlinks in our presentation, and Janet will tell you about an exceptional resource that she's put together for all of you. So we're going to have a comfortable conversation here with you all today and not rush through it just to make sure. So yeah. All right. So most importantly, I am the goddaughter of Tim Rodino. Tim was born in the 1950s to my grandparents, Regina and Carmen, and they were told, put him in an institution. They said, Carmen, you're a businessman, an innovator. You've got 9 other children to worry about. Tim kind of fell in the middle of the 10, just put him away. And they said, no, he's one of ours. They did go tour some of the institutions that were recommended to them, the flyers that were given to them at the doctor's appointments. And so they were founders of ARC of Indiana, and they mortgaged their own home to start preschool services in northern Indiana with other family friends. So inclusion and inclusivity and what we do and why we do it is just the core of who I am. And not knowing my dad, he actually served as my father figure growing up. So I am very close with my Uncle Tim. Also, I taught kids with severe disabilities for 9 years. I was a special ed director for 18 years. I've had the privilege of many service leadership opportunities, including Indiana case president, and then the case policy and chairperson for a 2-year term. And through that, I've grown and got all kinds of networks, and I'm a connector. If you know me, I love to connect people and make things happen. And so that's part of it. And I also am, my company now is Unified Leadership, where I do consultation in special education and systems development. And we can, here's my website, right? My research is in dispute resolution and the experiences of a director receiving and responding to a request for a due process hearing. And I'm so proud to turn the microphone over to my friend and dissertation chairperson from Indiana University, Janet Decker. Janet, while I was working on my dissertation, she said, do you know of Cadre? And I didn't. And when I went to the website, I was mad. I was mad that I'd been a director for 15 years and didn't know about Cadre and all of the resources. And from that moment, I've become a super fan. Janet encouraged me to come to the Cadre Symposium, and I was here in 2017, presenting preliminary findings of my research, and we've just had an opportunity now to develop as colleagues. So that's what you'll see today. So Janet?
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So yeah, and I kind of share that, and maybe some of you are first-time attendees, and maybe you're kind of disappointed you didn't learn about the resources and the support and all the knowledge that Cadre can provide, because I was a special education teacher for years and dealt with a lot of conflict between families and schools. These are my kiddos on the right. They're some of the kids that I taught that I was closest with is that when they were the age I was teaching them, and then on the left is more recently as adults. And so, you know, through working with them and seeing them continue to grow and seeing the early intervention, the intense intervention that they experienced when I was teaching them applied behavior analysis in Princeton, New Jersey, I saw how important their early intensive education was. It was at a private school that was publicly funded by the public school districts, and the only families that could get access to that type of education were extremely wealthy or had extreme social capital that got them that position. So early on through that experience, I learned how inequitable the type of intervention kids get, and why families can be really upset, and why relationships can break down between families and school districts, and the adversarial nature can happen. But so proud of the students I taught. Then you'll see up at the top, that is me as a kiddo, and then me now. So I didn't realize it at the time, but I received special education services with a speech impediment. I was one of the students, like many that you hear about, that you don't even know that's what it is. And again, through the public district, wasn't getting the type of intervention that was fixing my speech impediment, and actually got private intervention that, again, was very expensive, but because I could access it, I was able to. And then finally there on the lower side is my 14-year-old son, Ryan, but he's absolutely a phenom now. He's very into athletics, but he was born with a club foot. So he would have other health impairment with a club foot, again, because of having the resources, having the access, and having health insurance, and living in this country and not another country. We were able to get early intervention services, and no longer does he have issues with his club foot. That experience, of course, like so many of you, I'm sure, have experiences that, you know, the idea of disability being an evolving concept, a social construction, and how, you know, he no longer has a disability, and how intervention can absolutely matter. So then most recently, I teach future and current educators and law students at Indiana University. My area is legal literacy, which you're going to hear a lot about, as well as special education legal literacy in particular, because I think through education, that's another way of early conflict resolution. When you have people who are knowledgeable about the law, it actually empowers them to do the right thing, and to be able to do the right thing, and leverage the law to do the right thing.
Excellent. So we're going to frame our time together today through 5 just common themes that we face in special education. This is a really practical session, also based in law, policy, and research. And then we're going to give you some strategies that you can utilize, because we want it to be practical as well. Yep, that's how we're organizing it. All right, so we'll just jump right in, Janet, with our first one.
That sounds great. So some very wonderful and courageous volunteers have been willing to come up and participate in a skit. So if you have a speaking part, if you could sit here, and then the narrator right here, and they're going to act out an adversarial IEP meeting for them. Yep. And I'll let you all share the mic. So narrator, you're first, and then you can pass the mic.
The participants of today's meeting are scheduled to discuss and finalize an IEP for Alexa, who is a student with autism. At the conclusion of the IEP meeting, Alexa's mother and the school are supposed to sign the Individualized Education Program, or IEP, which becomes a legally binding contract. The IEP must outline a variety of details, including the special education and related services that the school is legally obligated to provide Alexa. However, as you will see, some IEP meetings don't go as planned and become quite adversarial.
Welcome, everyone. As you know, today we are having this meeting to determine Alexa's IEP goals, services, and placement. Let's start with introductions. I'm the Director of Special Education.
I'm Alexa's homeroom teacher. I don't think I need to be here. I mean, I just met Alexa this year and I really don't have much to say about this meeting. Plus, the substitute teacher who was supposed to cover for me didn't show up. So I really need to get back to my classroom.
I'm an instructional coach. Unfortunately, Principal Too Busy couldn't be here today, so I'm filling in for him.
Hi, I'm Alexa's special ed teacher, and I've been working with her for a year. I love her. She's a wonderful girl. She met her IEP goals last year in reading, but not in math.
I'm Alexa's mother. And I know that Alexa needs a full-time aide to be successful in math because last year didn't work.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but before we talk about an aid, we do need to share information about Alexa's test scores.
I know that I'm an equal member of this IEP team. Why can't I speak first?
Before today's meeting, we discussed Alexa's math assessments with the school psychologist, and we wrote this IEP that states Alexa should remain in her current reading placement. But what she really needs for math is to be in a math classroom that's co-taught by a general education teacher and a special education teacher.
I told you, Alexa needs an individual aid in math to be successful. Because you aren't listening to me, I'm just going to file a due process hearing instead.
All right, thank you. Thanks for volunteering. While they're working their way back to their tables, why don't you just turn to your neighbor and talk about if you have seen anything problematic at IEP meetings or other parent-district interaction? You want me to take the clicker to? No worries. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I thought I'd give them a little bit of time to talk.
Looking forward to this conference.
I think so.
That's all right. It's fun. This is a good one.
Yeah, I love the variety of people too. So good. All right, let's come back together in about 10 seconds. Okay, great. All right, let's come back together. I'm so glad that you had an opportunity to talk with one another. Maybe just take a few of you to volunteer something that came out, that just a category of a problem at an IEP meeting or an adversarial situation. Just what's an example that maybe you talked about? Yeah.
Predetermination that was all decided before they walked in.
Predetermination. So in this skit, you saw that it was all decided before they walked in. Yeah, good. That's a legal problem. Absolutely. What else? Yeah.
Lack of meaningful parental.
Right. Lack of meaningful parental participation. Absolutely. And that caused Alexa's mom to feel left out and get angry and want to go on to legal action, right? Yeah.
Sometimes having disagreement, not only between parent and school-based team, but disagreement within the school-based team.
Right. Yeah.
Which, I was a team chair, which, presents its own challenges.
Yes. Yes, to make sure that everybody got that. So not only the disagreement between the family and the school district, but within the team, within the IEP team and the representatives from the school district, there's some disagreement potentially too. Yeah. And one more.
I was just thinking of the experience of a parent of the lack of seriousness from some of the team members. Like, I'm just here. It's like not really caring, or all that matters is like I'm buddies with your kid.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, lack of seriousness that this is, and also that, people are coming from different perspectives, and maybe the general ed teacher just met the student, but maybe other people, and of course the mom, this is about the student's future, and to have somebody kind of be offhanded would be upsetting for sure. Sure. So, and the skit is clearly, fictionalized, but based on many IEP meetings that I have observed and also read about in the case law. And these, raise your hand if you think it's somewhat realistic that these issues happen. I hope that, and unfortunately, I think I drafted this, gosh, probably in 2006. So this was realistic back then. It's still realistic today. So, we talked about some of the different issues, but from the case law, just some kind of legal, practical strategies to take away, always making sure there's a public agency representative who's there, not just a substitute, but somebody who really can offer resources, and the other required team members. And if they're new, and so many times new, for instance, at Indiana University, our general education teachers are not required to learn much at all about special education. And so it's the district and others to help educate a variety of team members about how important the IEP team meeting is and what their role and responsibilities are. And then we already talked about predetermination, how important that is. And then just this big idea, and that's why you're all here at the conference, is you want to try to avoid future litigation, because it's expensive, of course, but it's also time consuming and it's emotionally draining. It damages relationships. The case I was involved in that while I was in law school, that wasn't finished by the time I ended law school and I got out of it. I was a consultant in it, but it went all the way to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And by the time the issue was resolved, the main issues were already forgotten about because the kid had aged so much, and all the attention removed it from the kid that got spent on the time-consuming litigation, and the relationships were damaged forever. And it was really a bad situation to see. So I've seen it firsthand. So of course, why you're here is to ensure really early intervention, early conflict resolution, fostering parent-school relationships, having facilitated IEP meetings, but then also taking advantage of the other type of dispute resolution. And this just kind of goes through why adversarial relationships can end up being resulting in litigation. There's also just the exhausting of administrative remedies that the parents have to go through when it's an IDEA issue. Importantly, we're going to talk about a little bit more that, especially based on some recent Supreme Court decisions, that if the issue involves IDEA and Section 504 or just Section 504, that issue of exhausting administrative remedies isn't a necessity for parents. And also, if it's a Section 504 issue, then that comes with the opportunity for monetary damages. And so the stakes get a lot higher, which increases the reason why you want to avoid the problematic situation in the first place, and you want to have good family school communication.
So going off what Glenna said this morning about what do we do about it? What are the small things we can do in our schools to put things into practice? As a director, I always say, mind your P's, your policy, your processes, and then your people. Do your people know your policies and processes, right? So things that you can do for your people, giving them case conference agendas, notes templates, having the conference schedule mapped out, and there is appropriate coverage for the general education teacher to be there and participate, having the resources, right? And making sure that they have manageable caseloads.
Sorry.
So there are a few different links with on the Cadre website to this session. And this is just a screenshot of a resource that I created based off of an article about family and school collaboration published by Teaching Exceptional Children. And this is just a quick look for's based on that article of things that are positive between families and schools, and then things that are warning and red flags. So I've provided that to you as a resource. You could just take that back and use it as a 5-minute talking point in one of your PLCs with your teachers in order to start to make people aware that maybe unintentionally some of the things that they're doing are causing some of the conflict in these meetings. Also, Cadre has a ton of resources, and again, resource linked here. This one is about helping people be at their best and making sure that everyone is equipped. The gen ed teacher knows their roles. The parent feels empowered with their rights and knows the process and how they can have meaningful input. So resources here. Also, some practical recommendations. You can address concerns either before the meeting begins or concerns during the meeting as it arises, and you can do that with the agenda. You can come up with some actionable strategies to use in the meeting. There's linked in here a worksheet to help a team think about if maybe the one-on-one aid question, because that comes up often in our meetings. But if you know before the concerns, then you can meet with the school team prior. One thing is it's emotional for everyone and the school team too. So sometimes as a director, I experienced just being able to get together and hear it from their perspective, let them put it in their words and vent, and then problem solve together is really, really helpful. So some more practical recommendations, our emotions can really cloud our actions, right? So we need to allow that team, as I was saying, the time to process that. Also, we need to make sure that our discussions are actionable. And the last point here is so important. It's just to remain human. A lot of the training that I do with my staff is about empathy and understanding what it might be like to raise a child with a disability. I didn't have that experience, so I really don't know, but I can empathize and I can understand, and I can teach my staff about the cycles of grief that appear in our IEP team meetings for parents, and that helps our staff just to be more knowledgeable and more responsive to maybe the way the parents are presenting themselves in that moment, in that meeting.
All right. So at the end of every topic, so we're talking about these 5 different topics that are common topics that arise in the case law, but also we have the blending of that. I have the legal perspective and Angie has the real world practical perspective. And so the resources that we're sharing are easy, open access, digestible resources. They're linked in the PowerPoint. And then I'm going to share a Google Doc with you as well. But here are just some specific to this topic, this first topic of IEP meetings and how to prevent conflict, and also how to increase knowledge for both families and school staff about ableism. And in fact, that first article there, it's just a very short 5-minute read. But Jennifer, the first author on that, was a keynote at the last Cadre conference, and I met her there, and it resulted in that collaboration. So that's another positive of getting to know people at this conference. The second one, if you want to get out your phones, if you're at all interested in following this podcast, it's called Chalk and Gavel. It's a new podcast. Feel free. I'm not going to be offended if you get out your phones and go ahead and go on any podcast subscription. So, Apple and Spotify and even YouTube. But it's not focused specifically on special education, but there are a few special education episodes. And it's a way to keep abreast of the evolving law. So learning about the recent Supreme Court decisions and what the practical implications are. The 2 podcasters are one's a former school law attorney who focused on special education and currently a professor, and he was a former teacher. The other is a former teacher and school principal who's now a professor. So they're really entertaining. Chalk and Gavel. I highly encourage that podcast if you are into that. I think it's a great way to stay up to date and multitask. And then the final is a curriculum it's intended to teach both parents, but primarily school staff about special education law, about disability law. And it's a curriculum that is 8 legal lessons about different topics. It is outdated, but it's not out of date because those same issues are the same issues that we're talking about here today. So it is just a curriculum to implement. No one needs legal training to implement it. And it's designed to have these lessons that you can have at schools or have at professional development sessions where it's supposed to be easy to digest, interactive, activity-based learning. All right, and so we'll go to the next one.
Oh, thank you.
So then the next topic involves discipline and MDR procedural mistakes. Raise your hand if you've ever dealt with a discipline or a issue involving MDRs, manifestation determination reviews, quite a few of you. So that's something that you see in the case law quite a bit. Let's, sure, definitely.
We're pushed back.
Well, you better have a microphone.
I want to push back a little bit on the first item. Procedural compliance will not avoid conflict. And that's what the problem we have is that school districts go into IEP meetings. Sorry, we call it PPTs in Connecticut. Go into IEP meetings having a checklist of things they've got to do legally of procedural compliance. That's it. Parents don't care about that. They care about the substance. They care about whether the kid's getting a meaningful education. And so, yes, you got to follow procedures, and but you're never going to get reversed by a court on procedures. You're only going to get reversed on substance, on whether a FAPE has been offered. And so that's really where the focus has got to be. And that comes down to the issue of listening. That seems to be the more critical issue. So I just wanted to suggest that a focus on procedures is a wasted effort.
All right.
This is why Andy and I are friends, because we can have these good open dialogues, right? You know, I agree with you, Andy, in some regard, both, right? Procedural and substantive. And as I do this presentation again more, I'll add in some more of about the listening skills. I touched on that a little bit with empathy, but I agree, parents, that isn't necessarily what matters to them. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So moving on to discipline. So let's just come up with this scenario to put into context. So we have KJ, a kindergartner. Mom requests special education evaluation due to the daughter's academic and behavioral issues at school. The mom makes an appointment with an outside psychologist who diagnoses KJ with ADHD. The student receives interventions at school, but the school determines that special education, and specifically having an IEP, is not needed. Move along when KJ is in third grade now, move from kindergarten to third grade. The school becomes concerned because KJ is laughing and moving around the room at inappropriate times. There's physical aggression, and KJ is appearing to talk to someone who was not present. The school then refers KJ to an outside mental health agency. Ultimately, KJ is suspended and then expelled for threatening behavior. So, just kind of a situation that arises that is kind of like a common fact pattern where a student and a parent is seeking to have support and intervention early on, and it's kind of a wait and see situation. And then eventually it becomes very serious where the student has ultimately been removed from the school setting and could have gotten a lot more early intervention support. So a big kind of legal recommendation there is making sure that you're really looking at behavioral interventions, behavioral supports, even if the school district doesn't believe that the student's eligible for an IEP, but also making sure that staff and others recognize that there's a lot of unidentified students with disabilities, and oftentimes it doesn't come out until there's a major discipline issue. And so regardless of whether the school has properly identified them or not, with the school's child find obligations, they have the responsibility to provide those type of procedural and substantive protections in the manifestation determination review. So important legal recommendations there, important issues to pay attention to.
So slow down the manifestation train, right? We work with our principals or the suspension train, not give just a 10-day suspension for the first offense, right? We need to slow it down, and we need to think really carefully about it. As directors, we need to have some key performance indicators that help us understand what that looks like, and for us to monitor the use of the suspension in our schools. So why does it matter? A lot of our hearings and complaints rise out of discipline issues, right? So it matters that we really focus on this with our teams as well. It also really matters because when kids are suspended, they're not in school and they're not learning, right? We need to keep our kids in school. So, thank you.
Can I have a question on the previous slide real quick? It's educate clients that manifestation determination reviews may be required for students who have not yet been identified as students with disabilities. Can you say a little bit more about that? Only because I'm the parent advisor for PTI. And for the first time, I have a student client who's not on an IEP, that's a whole different part of the story, but the district said they were gonna do a manifestation determination. And I never knew that those things were not directly correlated.
Yeah.
Did you say?
So it could be.
You don't have to have an IEP to have a manifestation.
Sure. So it could be that through the FAPE requirement under section 504, that a manifestation determination is required for that.
Okay.
But what I was really getting to, I've seen in the case law, is where when there's misbehavior and there's discipline,
Yes.
that's like a sign, these common discipline referrals, that's a sign that there's probably something else going on. And so it's a sign that it's an unidentified student with a disability that should have been identified. And so then once it goes then through due process and through the system, then if I find that the school district should have identified this as a student with a disability, then that it doesn't matter that they weren't identified, it's that they should have been. And so just kind of making sure that not necessarily that you're providing MDRs for all students, but also recognizing if the misbehavior is communication, all students are, potentially in need of more behavioral intervention and supports if they're having repeated misbehavior situations.
And MDRs are part of the 504 plan process.
If for part of having a FAPE for 504, it could be. It's a different, it doesn't look exactly the same, but
Okay.
yeah.
Can you please repeat any questions that are asked from the audience?
Yes, and I'll just repeat that last question was just about going back to section 502, to the idea that a student might need a manifestation determination review, even if they haven't been identified as a student with a disability. So we talked about how, because the question was about a particular situation where they were being asked to do an MDR for a student who wasn't identified as a student with an IEP. And we talked about how section 504 might be at issue there.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on with a few more practical recommendations around manifestation determinations. And a lot of you in here are very experienced directors. You may know some of these things. I mentor new directors. My original mentor, Wendy Height, is sitting right here in the audience. So you can take some of these talking points back to your groups as well. Directors, we really have to know the legal landscape, right? We have to keep on top of that. We also have to know the practical issues that we're facing, such as the placement responsibilities when a school can't educate a child locally. Like, what does that look like? How do we navigate that in our state? Because that looks really different state to state. We also need to know about our state's excess cost system. That's the state funds in, I believe most states, where there can be some support for the districts for students whose costs significantly exceed the other students' needs. And we need to know how we can translate that into our practice here. So we also need to know the financial responsibilities and then corrective actions, right? What comes when we're not paying attention to this, right? It's significant disproportionality, and that we don't want to get into that spot, right? We want to stay ahead of that. And also, like Glenna said, we want to use that data as an opportunity to keep improving our systems. So practical recommendations for this. Here's just a sample of what one of my colleagues uses for MD practices in his district. Now, sometimes when it's weapons, drugs, we might not be able to stick to this, but generally this here is an outline of, in days 1 to 3, talk with the family, think about a behavior plan. If there's not an FBA, days 4 to 5, have an IEP meeting. My friends, we don't need to wait till day 10 to hold the IEP meeting. We can hold it sooner and we can start to talk about something seems to not be working here. What can we do to fix it? We can adjust, we can revise services. We can look at our specially designed instruction for our behavior goals. We can then, if on days 6 to 7, if the student is suspended again, another case conference to review plans, right? Day 8 to 9, another case conference. Like, we just need to keep coming back because some of our kiddos have really complicated needs. And if it's not working, now I saw some eyebrows from some directors in the room about, Angie, that's a lot of meetings you're suggesting, right? And you may get that pushback in your buildings, but guys, this is only like 2 2 to 3% of the students we work with, right? So, and it is worth our time to invest in those situations with these frequent meetings, right? We always need to document issues with the services. And then when we're meeting often, then we can maintain that rapport in the relationship with the family. We can talk about what's working at home. A lot of times when kiddos that are up for suspension, they're also in wraparound services in our community. We can invite those agency partners to the table in order to be a part of that process there. So this is a tool, I've linked it in here. It's a Google form. You can utilize it, make it your own. It'll force you to make a copy. It is a heat map that tracks these number of days that I shared a couple slides ago, and it color codes it. So as a director, you can be aware of all the students, even if you have a very large district, and where they are in their number of days of suspension, so that you can keep on top of these processes.
Can I ask a question about
Absolutely.
the Google slide or Google sheet?
Yes.
Is that one sheet for the entire district, and who enters the names on that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know the answer to that because I haven't used this tool. It's a colleague of mine that uses it. So I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because
Confidentiality and who sees it. And,
like you have 80, 90, 100 sites,
Mhm.
like.
Yeah, and probably by then you would have site coordinators. You might have an administrative assistant who knows these processes are happening that could enter that data. Now I know it's, and you can enter data into, well, this is a sheet, so the names are actually entered, but yeah, good practical question there. She asked about who enters the data and how do we manage that. So this is a tool, and I think that'd be a good discussion to have locally about how that can be most manageable without causing people more work. Yeah.
I was asking the same question in my head as Angie was talking about that. And what I would do is have my data person run that report out of Power School and then put it in there to share.
Okay, so the response in the audience from a practicing director in South Carolina is she would have her data person run a report out of Power School and enter the data for her. Okay, yeah, thank you for that question.
All right, so that's topic 2. And as we said, we'll share some resources. These are just a few resources. One thing, the first resource involves students exhibiting violent and disruptive behavior. And just know that this is really serious stuff that we're talking about. If you look at many of the recent school shooters, many of them were students who were either unidentified as students with disabilities or were students with disabilities. So this is really serious and important stuff to take care of discipline issues and be proactive and preventative. All right, so moving on to the third topic, the topic of failure to identify students with hidden or invisible disabilities. So relating to the last one of maybe there's students who are having discipline issues that have been unidentified. But this is a topic that I've become much more aware of and concerned about with the increase of students who are either IDEA and Section 504 eligible, which almost all IDEA students would be Section 504 eligible. And just to make sure everybody is clear, Section 504 is the civil rights law that prohibits discrimination of individuals with disabilities. So it applies to students in public schools as well as employees in public schools. And then ADA, Title II of ADA would be paired with Section 504 for private institutions. So I'm specifically talking about students who are just Section 504 only eligible, that might have hidden or invisible or non-apparent disabilities. And we're seeing an increase, the data is showing that there's an increase, especially after COVID, with students who might have disabilities that would be eligible under Section 504, but maybe not under IDEA. So it might be psychological issues, like mental health issues. It could be, it could be physical disabilities like medical issues. And so the research is showing that the rates are higher. Plus, we as a country haven't done a very good job of tracking Section 504 only students. So we're also kind of just figuring this out. But school districts are reporting a lot more Section 504 requests. As I already mentioned, it might be potentially more easy for families to file litigation under Section 504 and not have to exhaust administrative remedies so that they could potentially get monetary damages, which are not available under IDEA. So this is a really important issue for people to be aware of, and also to try to prevent disagreements that happen when it's with either a student who's both eligible under IDEA and Section 504, or those students who are just eligible under Section 504. So to put it in context, let's think of this scenario that comes from a court case. A school decided that it will no longer enroll a student whose life-threatening asthma was aggravated by an allergy to scents. So the student was no longer eligible to go to this school. The family claimed that the school violated Section 504 by not providing their daughter with a scent-free environment to accommodate her asthma. Ultimately, the family prevailed in that. And so when you think about situations like this, it's really important to increase awareness of all people, all staff, but also making sure that there's students who might not register as traditionally considered as having disabilities, but under the law, they do have disabilities under Section 504. And then also just making sure that all school employees are educated about their legal obligations for Section 504 as well as ADA. So no matter if it's a public school district or a public school or a private school, that there is this prohibition against discrimination based on disability.
And some practical resources there. Again, I'm going to come back to systems. We really need to have good systems to track our 504 because it's a lot looser than our IEPs. And a lot of times it might be school counselors or assistant principals in buildings that are in charge of 504s. So as a district, we need to make sure we have really good systems. CASE has developed some amazing resources, which I have linked here. There's a newly published 504 process manual written by Julie Weatherly. That's exceptional. There's also laminated guides and some virtual 504 training available. So if you're in your district, you're feeling like we really need to up our game and practices to prevent the issues that Dr. Decker was talking about, here's some really good resources for you to take back.
All right. And so ending with that topic, whoops. Again, hyperlinked resources when it comes to different hidden disabilities. Oftentimes people are not aware about hidden disabilities in the first place, but definitely not aware of all the myriad of examples of hidden disabilities. So there's a couple of really quick articles here specifically about legal obligations for students with asthma, students with epilepsy, students with anxiety, PTSD, students with allergies, as well as students with substance abuse and dependency. I have, if this is a topic that you are really interested in, I have an article that the latter half of it is frequently asked questions resulting for districts and others about Section 504 and its application in the school environment. It's in press right now, so I don't have a copy of that, but if you'd like, I'd be happy to send it to you. And it really goes into this issue in a lot more depth than we have time to today. So then turning to topic 4, this idea that all stakeholders, whether it's families or whether it's school staff, need to be legally literate. So in your handout, which you're welcome to be filling in if you'd like, or just as a kind of summary of what we're talking about, there's a definition of legal literacy. And what's really important, I think a lot of times people think to be legally literate or to understand the law, it's maybe some of what you were mentioning about compliance, that you just need to know how to check the boxes. But really with legal literacy, it's a skill. It's about the substance of the law, the meaning behind the law, making sure that there's meaningful progress. So it's not only about knowing the facts and knowing what you have to do and procedural checkboxes, but it's very much about learning how to leverage the law to empower you to advocate for students and staff based on the law. So it's being able to spot legal issues and then apply the legal issues to make not only legal decisions, but also ethical decisions. Because of course, there's many instances where the law is confusing very confusing. It might vary from place to place. It might vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It might be absent. We might not have law related to the topic that you're dealing with. Or you might disagree with the law. You might think it's unjust and you might want to do something differently. So just knowing those legal nuances and knowing what the law is and how to apply it to empower you to advocate for the things that you care about is really important. And that's the same thing with people in your environments, right? That instead of learning about the law so that, because a lot of times school staff are fearful of the law, it can be paralyzing. Instead of having that psychological anxiety about the law, learning about it gives people confidence. The research shows empowers them to be able to utilize it to their advantage and to the advantage of students. So it's just really important to be aware that typically district level leaders like Angie are typically required to have one law class. They're not in leadership, they're typically required to have no law classes. You know, a lot of the teachers leaving Indiana University, the special education focused teachers don't have any law class. So they're leaving with very little legal literacy, and it's really important that we focus on that to prepare them. So let's just think about this scenario. You have media circling around the school after discovering that one of the district students suffered nearly fatal injuries after a teaching assistant physically restrained him. So I talked about teachers, I talked about leaders having very little legal literacy, any kind of paraprofessionals, any kind of teaching assistants, any kind of other school employees, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. They're definitely not going to understand their legal requirements. SROs aren't going to understand their legal requirements. So anyway, we have a teaching assistant physically restrained the student. The 16-year-old boy with autism suffered fractures in both of his femurs and is in intensive care for weeks and underwent a transfusion for blood loss. So current event, I read about cases like this, but this was a current event that occurred. So clearly need to make sure that people know what they're supposed to do and their legal responsibilities there. So again, we have research that documents that not only teachers, but also leaders are limited in their legal literacy, and that teachers want to know more about the law. School administrators want to know more about the law. They're just woefully underprepared in the law. But once they do, we also have research that documents that once they do learn about the law, even a little bit about the law, that increases their confidence, they're less anxious, and it also influences those meaningful changes that they can make in school, that they talk about how learning about the law then led to positive changes in their school environments. So again, they want to know more about the law, and they're also learning a lot about the law from their equally uninformed colleagues. So it's also just really important to make sure that the type of legal information they get is vetted and is accurate. So I'll let you go, right? I guess just making sure that I've kind of said this, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but just, you know, it's not just leaders, it's not just teachers, but it's all school employees that need to be aware of the law, and also making sure that people in that environment are sharing resources to increase that legal literacy.
Okay. Fantastic, Janet. So I'm going to go into some practical resources. Yes, Joe. The microphone closer. Thank you.
Would be, how would we get more engagement from the districts to provide professional development on understanding the aspect of the law, when, especially when we talk about all school personnel, when professional development opportunities is so extremely limited, especially in the state that I'm from. Most educators get 1 day of professional development outside of like their prep days before school starts.
Yeah. I'll just say, I hear that all the time. There's so limited time for professional development. And I think it's identifying, you know, specific buy-in, like what's happening in your specific environment. What are the legal issues? Is there disability-based harassment happening at your school? Are there, you know, lawsuits that are taking up a lot of educators' time? Like whatever it can to put the buy-in, because you are going to probably be asking employees to potentially do something out of school hours to educate themselves, teaching them why it's important. So there are these, the resources we've shared are things that people can read in like 5 minutes, but also things like podcasts that people can listen to on their commute to and from work. So it is asking for one extra thing, but it's not like asking to sit down for an hour and talk about things, but it's just trying to have bite-sized nuggets of legal literacy, but increasing the idea of like, why should it matter to them? I've taught, in fact, I did research where with teachers about legal literacy, and 100% of them thought that pre-service teachers should have a law class, because they learned once they had a law class in their master's program, it solved all these questions that they had. It made them feel so much better. They weren't scared the same. The whole reason I went to law school is because I wanted to figure out, like, how do I advocate more for students? I know the statute, but I didn't understand anything about case law and all the different legal nuances. So I think if you can educate them about why it matters and why it might make them feel more confident and empowered. A lot of times teachers come like, I want to advocate more for English learners. I want to advocate more for low-income students. Whatever their passion is, this can be like a tool to help them advocate more. The other thing is the research shows that teachers and educators aren't politically engaged. They're not voting. And so like also, it feels like law is being done to them instead of them having an active way to participate. So learning a little bit more about the legal system and learning about, how they can become involved in advocacy work is also empowering, I think.
Janet, that was a great response to Joe's question. And for our live stream friends, Joe asked about how we can address PD opportunities when we don't have much time in our districts. And Joe, I'm going to give some more answers to that as well. So appreciate that question. The first thing I always love is the essential baseline. People need to know their role. They need to be very, very clear on their role. And also then leveling up concerns, right? So an example of that is I don't generally want my paraeducator speaking directly with my parents, right? They don't generally have the full picture. They're lovely people, but it's not really their job to communicate with parents. But they are the people that walk the kids out to the car at the end of the day, right? And they might hear things directly from the parent. So that paraeducator can come back in and relay that parent's concern to the teacher so that the teacher can address it. Another example of that is building principals. They may be going through 5 IEP meetings in a day and they recognize the one that with Mrs. Height, she just seemed a little not herself. She seemed to have questions that even when given the opportunity, didn't she didn't bring them up. So I asked building principals then, give me a call or an email. Say, Angie, we had this IEP meeting today and Mrs. Height might need some follow-up. Would you be willing to call her so I can call her and say, hi, Mrs. Height, I heard you had your annual meeting today. And do you have any follow-up questions? I'm the director. I want to help you. How can I do that? So that's a way in which we can level up concerns and just being aware of the soft skills. The other part of this slide, relating back to our case study about the restraint, is that districts need to have a really robust system in which we train people in how to, most importantly, de-escalate situations. And when needed as a last resort to prevent harm to themselves or others, how to engage in intervention, right? And practically, it's difficult to train everyone, but not impossible. In my own way we did this, we only did the physical portion with people that were most likely to be involved in it, but the really great parts of the de-escalation part of the training, we provided it to bus drivers, specials teachers. Everybody got trained and we kept bringing up information and little bite-sized pieces, as Janet suggested, regarding how we can de-escalate and identify those situations. So you're asked, Joe, about like, how do we help people in the moment? We've only got 1 day per year to train them. So this is something I'm just giving you a little insight of what I'm developing is a closed AI agent that is programmed with federal law, state law, and then it'll be programmed with the district specific procedures so that the special ed teachers, the counselors, the principals can have it in their hand to be able to go to a trusted source that isn't an open AI agent, that is very FERPA compliant and confidential. So when a principal is on their way to be the chairperson of the meeting and they know that the parent is going to ask about extended school year and the principal doesn't really know what that is or how it applies to the law, they can quickly ask this agent, FAPE Compass, what do I need to know about extended school year and how can I respond to this parent's concern? And so it just equips people to really know how to apply the law in practical situations. It's in beta in 6 school districts right now, and I hope by the first of the year to have it ready. It's been being tested for several months. When it's something about legal issues, I want to make sure it's right and giving good answers in a closed system before it would go out into more districts. So that's a way that we can just utilize, we heard Glenna Gallo say this morning, right? Leverage our technology to help us do the jobs. And for me, this is a solution that I can help people with right away. I also want to point out some conferences in addition to this one that you might be interested in increasing your own legal literacy and or sending some of the folks in your area to go to. The CASE Council of Administrators of Special Education has a law and leadership conference every April. These are the dates for this year. It will be in Atlanta, Georgia. And then the Education Law Association will be meeting here just in a couple weeks in Kansas City, Missouri. These happen every year and about this same time. So these are great opportunities for you to attend these trainings and increase your legal literacy. Also, Joe, another strategy that I use, and any new director I'm mentoring, I say, start with CEC's high leverage practices. And I say, buy a copy of the high leverage practices book for all of your special ed teachers, and then incorporate that into your professional learning communities throughout the whole year. So we may only get 10 minutes today on an early release day, but we can talk about explicit instruction. And in the next 10 minutes that we get, we can talk about how we utilize accessible technology in our training. And it just becomes a theme that I keep grounding in the high leverage practices. And then if maybe I've got a teacher who's new or struggling, or I need to have a teacher on an improvement plan, I can tie their improvement plan back to this. And it doesn't seem so punitive because we've all been utilizing the book and the resource too. There are lots of great tools for implementing high leverage practices. So for you as a leader to know how to utilize these, as a parent too, you might want to pick it up, your parent training center, get to know more about these practices here. So those are hyperlinks. CEC, the Council for Exceptional Children, also offers free training for paraeducators that's exceptional. And so while we might be very resource limited or time limited, leverage your free resources. Again, linked in here. Okay, Jen.
All right. So speaking of free resources, on the handout that you all have, there's a link to this Google Doc, and I wanted to provide a Google Doc because it's going to be an evolving document. So I'm just going to send around this to pass around so you can see what kind of things are in that Google Doc. This is just a free resource that you can share with others. But you can just skim through the different topics, and this is just the start of this resource. Again, it's for all legal literacy, so it's not just specific to special education, but oftentimes students with disabilities have a wide variety of other legal issues that come up and that staff need to know about a variety of legal issues. So it's under the legal literacy topic. There's a link to the teeny URL there. If you still can't access it, let me know and I'll make sure that you get an electronic copy of this document, but this is a hard copy going around. Some additional legal resources to share. There is a specific Chalk and Gavel podcast that's specific about FAPE and about the Andrew case and about school employees' legal responsibilities for students with disabilities to make meaningful progress. And so that's a great resource to have school employees listen to. That alone will provide them with a lot of information about special education law and their legal responsibilities. And then there's a variety of some other resources here specific to the increase of Section 504 litigation. And also, just another type of employee that would need to know about the law, school nurse, there's a resource there for that. So let's move on to our last topic. And then we also will have time for question and answer too. So you notice on your handout, feel free to be writing down some questions that you might have or comments or suggestions. And the last topic is staff shortages. So this is no big surprise that there's a huge staff shortage, but kind of a part of the whole staff shortage that relates to this conference is that so much of special education teachers' frustration that you hear is that they're frustrated with the adversarial nature of the job, that they really get frustrated by all the conflict that they're having to endure, all the difficulties that they're having to incur, and also the lack of support to deal with that. And so if you want to learn more about it, there's a resource here, a PBS News video about special education teacher shortages to get some more understanding about that, but also getting some practical strategies about how schools are responding to special education teacher shortages. Again, some additional articles about this, but I think it's really important. One thing is when I talk to teachers, I ask how many of them are future teachers, I ask how many of them are going to be special education teachers, and I teach in a room of about 120 pre-service teachers, and none of them raise their hand because they haven't identified their major as special education. They've identified their major as general education. So I make sure that they understand that they're all wrong, that all of them are going to be special education teachers, and really understanding that all school employees have this responsibility when it comes to students with disabilities and also the supporting special education staff. But related to that also is the idea that it helps people understand, whether it's district leaders or others, how many of you plan on violating special education law? And oftentimes nobody wants to, right? They don't think they're gonna. And once again, I'm like, all of you are going to. It's very likely that you're going to. And helping them understand that so much of the problem, whether is a bit outside of their control. And as we learned at the keynote today, there's a lot of things that we can do, and we can take this as an opportunity at the local and state levels of do what is within our avenues of control. But it's because IDA is an underfunded mandate. And so how can you expect that the law isn't going to be violated? And so like Joe is, or like you were saying, like not focusing so much on the compliance aspect, but focusing on the things that really matter, making sure your staff is satisfied, supported, so they don't leave, making sure you're retraining them, making sure you're attracting the right type of staff, focusing on those type of things, because we're in this situation that for the entire history of IDA, it's been underfunded. So we have this underfunded mandate being expected to do certain things where we don't have the resources to do that. So figuring out what you can do with those limited resources, and particularly to retain staff. Oh, was this? Okay, sorry, wrong way. There you go.
So some resources to address this. This link might not work anymore, and I think it's because what's happening with our government. But the OSEP Ideas That Work had a fantastic series, the Attract, Prepare, Retain series, and these were the topics that they talked about and some solutions. So even though you might not be able to access this, you can access the different topics like what is a residency? What are alternative certification programs? What does it mean to have a supportive workplace environment? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here too. I don't know if did I do 2 slides? Go back here. Okay, yes, there. So I do want to draw your attention to, we actually have a national coalition on special ed teacher shortages. CASE is a part of that. Many other organizations are a part of that. I wasn't aware of that at first too. I always love to find these great resources. So I'd suggest going there. And it's not just our teachers, it's our related service providers. We have a significant shortage of school psychologists, speech pathologists, and we need to be addressing that actively. So we partner with agencies like the American Speech and Hearing Association, the National Association of School Psychologists. You'll hear all of the great resources when you go here. Dr. Liz Bettini out of Boston University, one of my favorite people about addressing the special ed shortage. She has several well-written articles that are easily accessible. She says, well, this is actually a quote of my other friend, meet people where they're at and treat them like they're golden unicorns, right? When I get an opportunity, here we have a blind low vision teacher here, right? She is a rare and precious unicorn, a school psychologist, a bilingual speech pathologist, right? Those people need to be highly respected and make sure that they got what they need so that we can retain them. One of the ways we can retain our staff is knowing what they need, hearing directly from them. And so Liz Bettini has created, there's a link to here in the, so it's the IDEA, Lead IDEA Center is where this is going to take you to. And there's a link to the respect survey that you can utilize some of the questions or all of the questions with your staff to hear from them about their caseloads, about their planning time, so that you can identify the issues that mean the most to your staff. Here are also some other personnel resources to share, why teachers are leaving and what we can do about it, and an article about the litigation too. So yeah, Janet, these are resources in mitigating conflict? Here, yes, okay, I'm gonna keep going. So when we think about how we educate ourselves in mitigating conflict, I was referred to this book by Greg Abel, who we saw recognized at the beginning of this conference. And he said, Angie, this is my go-to book. This book is not about special education disputes. This is about all kinds of peace and mediation and disagreements between corporations. What I learned from this, staying with conflict, a strategic approach to ongoing disputes, it defines different kinds of conflict. And one of the types is enduring conflict. Enduring conflict, defined by Mayer, is deeply rooted, identity-based, based in values, systemic, rooted in distrust, and involves fundamental issues of power. And I'm like, wow, this is special education, right? And although this book is not about special education, the very first example is about an IEP meeting. And so what this realization did for me here is it made me accept that the conflict that we face is enduring. As a special ed director, I tried to prevent it and I tried to resolve it. And that's short-sighted. It's short-sighted because I need to recognize that we're not going to be able to solve these issues. These are going to be issues that last a long time. They're enduring. So what do we do then, right? I accept that it's enduring and I create systems and structures to allow people to show up and engage in the process. I love dancing. And I think it'd be cool to square dance. And when I see people square dancing, I just don't know how to get in. I don't know when to do-si-do my partner or step forwards or backwards, right? That's kind of like conflict resolution in special education. How do you enter into the dance? Once you get it, it's a great process, right? So it's our job to make sure that our systems are accessible and they're ready for everybody to jump in and work together on it. We also then, as leaders, need to support people to engage with enduring conflict. So I like to talk about not conflict prevention, conflict resolution. Yes, those are important. I like to talk about conflict engagement, where we can show up at the table and we can have hard conversations. Like you see Andy and I here, we'll challenge each other on things, and that helps us understand different viewpoints. We need to do that same kind of thing at our IEP meeting. So what's it mean to support the people? We've got to remain engaged. We got to keep showing up and leaning in, right? We need to work on the problems. We need to relate to people who are in conflict, right? I would say to parents, I can't imagine how hard this is for you. And I want to support you through it, right? We need to understand the perspectives of that, deepen our understanding about how people think about it, and then develop the emotional capacity as well as intellectual capacity to be at the table and to keep working on these issues. And I feel like we're all together in this conference developing some emotional capacity together, right? We feel the hope, we feel the, we're making connections that helps us when we have people to be able to rely on. We also need to look for areas where progress can be made. I said this in my session earlier in the week. I heard Glenna repeat it. We've got to do something. Like, could we at least do this, right? Well, could we just one thing, right? Let's just find areas where we can make progress. So sometimes as a special education director, and I would try to bring these issues up in my district about we need to teach people how to communicate. We need to teach people how to resolve conflict, right? I would get kind of this look from the admin around my table. Like, is this, like, how important is it to talk about trust with families and to teach teachers how to deal with trust, right? Because there's so many issues on a school district administrator's plate, right? They're like, oh, that's a soft skill. People trust each other, right? So one way I've approached this is I like to bring it into perspective for them. And a way that I elevate the importance of this conversation is to use data. I go to Cadre's website and you can pull up specifically your own state data about the rising number of due process hearing requests, the rising number of written state complaints, our concerns that OCR isn't accepting as many cases, right? And we can say, this is a problem, right? We need to be ahead of this. And it starts with relationships and trust. And that's why it's important that this become a priority in our district. I also have found, I'm a licensed superintendent and have worked with a lot of superintendents. If you talk about dollars, they'll listen. This is an unpublished study. Hopefully it'll be published in March. It's up for a journal review right now. But this is a study out of Indiana University that I was a part of, where we looked at the etiology of special education disputes from this perspective of parents and special education directors both. So it's a really great study. This is just one point I pulled out of it. The average procedural cost of responding to a due process hearing request in Indiana is this price you see here. Procedural. That's not substantive. A substantive outcome is anything that may be beneficial to a student, such as an independent evaluation, compensatory education, any other kind of piece. This is just procedurally the average of the cost. And so that helps me get superintendent's attention. I went a step further and I've designed a series I call Drivers and Levers of Special Ed Legal Costs. And I've worked with an insurance trust that insures a lot of school districts, and they're obviously concerned about the rising and growing number of complaints. And I used this opportunity. I framed it in this way so I could get people to pay attention about this. And I did a leadership development series where I identify the driver based on research and all that we know and broken relationships, all of that. And then the lever, like what can be done about it. And then it becomes a coaching series where I work with the directors that are part of this over the course of several months in order to engage that. So if you'd like to know more about that process, it is, I think it was really eye-opening. Superintendents were at the table and we put it in terms, and it ended up with a district-specific review with specific strategies for that district as well. I've given you a sample linked here. This is just a screenshot. It's longer. One of the drivers of special education legal costs is a lack of trust, right? It is a lack of trust. And you can see then there that the levers, being proactive, rapid and visible, offering relationships, and it describes it. So this is just one of the levers and then the sample drivers that I have identified. So we've got to talk in terms that superintendents will identify with. And when we put it into data, we put it into dollars, we can elevate the importance of all this work we've been talking about here all week. I want to do a time check here. 15 minutes. Okay. We are going to open it up for questions here in a minute. So as Janet said, be thinking. We love your questions. We learn from each other in that way. I'm going to quickly fly through the resources we have here at the end just to identify what they are. Obviously, Cadre's website, subscribe to their newsletter, follow Cadre on LinkedIn and Facebook. I follow them on those areas and there's not many followers. So y'all should be following them on their social media outlets. They share little clips and bites of information. Be familiar with Cadre's continuum of services and know when you're thinking about maybe I want to have a parent-to-parent assistance center. This, they call it the piano keys, but it's really the continuum here on Cadre of the resources available and practices you might want to look at. Review the interactive dashboard. Maybe I'm a data nerd, but I just have a really fun time on this website because you can select if you want it to be proportional or you want it to be individual incidents. You can compare two states. Maybe you're like, oh, Indiana is similar to Ohio, and I want to compare and contrast the number of complaints between Indiana and Ohio because I might call up my friend in Ohio or my friend sitting right here from Kentucky that's close to Indiana and have a conversation like, wow, Kentucky, you don't have a lot of state complaints. Like, you must be very proactive. What do you do? So this is a really, really great data tool. So Cadre, as Melanie said, has been around for over 25 years. And in their most recent round of grant funding, OSEP tasked Cadre with expanding their reach. Cadre has been funded to support parent centers, early intervention centers, and states, right? They haven't, with 3 staff, been able to get to supporting districts, the people on the ground who can implement some of these things. So OSEP said, Cadre, can you help states, help school districts to understand what they need to have the early dispute resolution practices? And from that charge, Cadre now has a whole section of their website dedicated just to districts. There's still the For Families tab, there's still the For States tab, and now there's one for districts as well, which is super helpful. On that, there's a portal where you can go to the Cadre's best information about building the early dispute resolution practices in your district. Additionally, there's a self-assessment tool that's a systems level framework that a district can utilize to look at their own early dispute resolution practices and to use it to identify a couple of key strategic priorities in order to make some differences. Some more Cadre district resources to share. The Guiding Principles of Collaborative Advocacy. This is honestly one of my favorite Cadre resources. It's a 2-page. It outlines 10 principles of collaborative advocacy about focusing on the student and several others. I like to utilize it when I'm working with teams and building their meeting norms so we can make sure that all of our meeting norms incorporate the perspectives of everyone at the table and that we have collaborative practices here as well. There are more resources in development too. Some things to share with families, the web page with families, the companion videos. One of my favorites is communicating with your child's school. Every district I work with, I say, you need to link this on your district website because parents need to know how they can communicate with their school. They need to know what words to use and what strategies to use. So passion led us here and it keeps us doing the work and leading us forward. And those are a lot of resources for you. But now we want to, before we end, open it up for your questions. Yes.
So in the area of like staff shortages, I'm curious what experience you have working with like teachers unions and collective bargaining agreements that prohibit and or limit your ability to use contract agencies to fill vacancies.
Okay, that's a good question and probably area specific. So I negotiated contracts with my teachers association, and I'm not aware in Indiana of that being a barrier about limiting contracts. So I think I would just work and figure out why. A lot of times when things are puzzling to me, my eyebrows go like this. And like Glenna said, I'm insanely curious about things. And so I just want to know the why behind it.
Yeah, the concern is that the district will replace permanent contracted teachers with like limited term contractors.
Yeah, okay. And for our live stream audience here, she's asking about experiences working with associations, collective bargaining agreements regarding contracted employees versus the employees that are there. And the concern she just stated is that teachers feel that they or related service providers might be replaced by contracted people. You know what, my own personal experience with that is I can't hire enough people. And I'm so grateful for the contract companies and the contract providers. And all my staff have been really grateful too, to have that support and help, because if not, they're covering those caseloads. So I think it would just be a really nice, like I would do a small group conversation with the union leadership to have some discussion about that. But yeah, thanks for that question.
And maybe anybody else in the room have similar situation, have any suggestions or ideas?
Has anybody else experienced that as a union issue?
So yes, in California, where are you at?
Here, California. Okay.
in Portland.
I work in Portland, the city of Portland.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, and you know, what, honestly, from the district perspective too, it's a lot, it's not cost efficient for us.
Oh, absolutely.
Higher, but you get to a point where they're like, your hands are tired, and you don't know what to do, and having that conversation, our community is having a very big issue. We can't solve this alone. Help us come to the table, help us brainstorm solutions, because we want certificated teachers, we want high qualities. We want someone good for our students too. Yeah, community issue, it's just, and I think that it's not just our local community, it's our national community, right? We've got to figure out, what do we change? How do we make education at the center?
Yeah.
You know,
And the comment from the back is that generally directors don't really want to hire contractors. We want our own employees that are part of our team and understand our culture and can be with us for a long period of time. For a while, I was like, I'm not doing contractors. We're not having contractors here. And well, you just get to a point that you have to. So yeah, I would prefer not to have contractors as well. They are exceptionally expensive too. Yeah.
it's just getting your union's voice in like advocacy too.
Yeah, having the union be part of the problem solving is a really great suggestion. I appreciate that. Yeah, I heard you talk about trust.
Oh, I was just saying, it goes back to your point of trust, right? I think whether it's in the IEP process or, you know, anything, it's, you know, also with employees and things of that kind of trust. How do we build that trust to know and understand that if that is a process that we do have to go through, hiring contract, you know, workers, that it is ultimately to benefit you, to benefit us, to benefit student, right? But I think the theme of the convention maybe is that trust piece, right? From yesterday and from today, you know, is that how do we build that trust among all parties to ensure that.
Yeah. And my response to how to build trust with people is to work on it collaboratively.
Yeah.
Like to invite the people to the table and to have honest conversation, put the issue out there. It's like, all right, let's hear it. Let's brainstorm the ideas. Yes, Wendy, you had a question.
To add to the trust, I work with some great contract agencies. But I have those relationships. I get emails every single day from different contract agencies, and they haven't vetted the candidates. So the ones that I work with, I say, now listen, before you bring a candidate to me, this is what we're looking for. And, you know, 10 years ago, we did not use as many contract agencies, but since COVID, there are all sorts of reasons people are choosing to be employed by a contract agency versus a district. And so I recognize that, but I'm also very selective on who, because I don't want to waste the candidate's time. I don't want to waste my time. So they know what we're looking for before they bring the candidates.
Great point, Wendy, about really getting to know your contract company and how they vet the employees before they present it to a district. Thank you. Additional questions. What other questions did you write down? What are you thinking about? Andy, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, when you went to the manifestations, piece. Simply, it's evaluate. That is, you know, whenever there's a question about whether it's eligibility or whether it's a manifestation, probably want to do an evaluation. That is a trustworthy exercise as well. It also is something which makes the district far more defensible going forward.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think with RTI and the focus on delay, it seems like I think there's a lot of misconceptions around response to intervention and not evaluating it. I've had plenty of employees say, our school says we will never evaluate kindergartens. We just have a policy, we never practice, we never evaluate kindergartners, things like that. So like really encouraging people to evaluate and showing that it's a defensible position. If you don't think that there is a eligible disability there, then you have the data to prove that. But I do think there's a lot of resistance to evaluations.
And I'm gonna do an and there, a good conflict strategy, right? And evaluate, and we need to, that's just the FDA. We've got to develop a really solid behavior intervention plan that's got professionally designed instruction and strategies to teach the skills the kids are missing.
Yeah.
If we just have data, it only goes so far. We need to also have a plan and implement it with fidelity. That's my hand.
Well, I'll do an and to that, which is that when you were talking about, de-escalation. De-escalation is too late. We ought to be looking well before that at what missing skills the student has that's causing this sort of reaction.
And I'll do an amen to that. Absolutely, yes, yes. And I'm seeing a lot of districts refocusing on their MTSS multi-tiered systems of support, especially around the emphasis to improve reading scores. A lot of work in the MTSS model in reading. And then when I work with the districts, I say, you're missing half your triangle. You also have to be looking at the behaviors and executive functioning and all of the other components in your MTS system and explicitly teaching kids how to do the behavior to expect out of it. I agree with you. Okay, we've got about a couple just minutes, maybe one more question here.
I want to just add with the behavior piece, you know, I saw this when I was a teacher, but then I see this with our pre-service teachers. They're not getting educated, at least in my circle, they're not getting educated on behavior intervention. They're not getting the skills. So it really is at the district level, making sure that teachers know how to teach different behavioral intervention. They're getting lots of focus on the academic side, but not the behavioral side. And so that's a real missing piece in their education as well.
And in addition to pre-service teachers, alternatively licensed teachers who go through an abbreviated program aren't getting a lot of that instruction either. Yeah. So we have our final question coming from the back of the room.
It's not a question, it's just a clarification. We talked earlier about a child who's not yet been determined to be eligible. How can they get the disciplinary protections? Why do we have to do a manifestation review on a child who has not been identified? The regulations have specific instances where we have to do that. So for example, if a parent requests an evaluation, and before the evaluation is completed, the student does something for which they're suspended, that student gets all of the protections of the IDEA. Another thing that comes up sometimes is if a teacher or other school personnel make a written statement to school administration that this child may be eligible for special education, that's another time when if that child engages in behavior for which they're going to be suspended long-term, they have the protections of the IDEA. So it's not a guesswork, it's there's specified situations.
That's helpful. Yeah, part of the regs. Yeah.
I will say that for that scenario exactly, the state that I'm from, the decision that made the due process hearings is really focused on if the state should have known. So or the school should have known. If there's behaviors, if there's evidence, if there's things that the school should have picked up on that has led to a place of management determination because of related behaviors due to the child's disability, like that should have been picked up and under child by. There is a responsibility for all players to be able to identify that. But that not for every single case, but that has been outlined for us.
Yeah, appreciate that, Joe. So in closing, I'm going to play a song for us as we leave, but I also want to highly encourage you to evaluate your session here, your session. Cadre's OSEP funded. They need to keep having the data to prove that they need to be around, right? And your response to the evaluation data helps them do that. So please evaluate your session. If previous sessions you didn't get to evaluate, please go back and do that so they have the data.